So embarrassing. I hate being late. So I'm really glad to be here. And things have changed. I have to tell you that 3 weeks ago, I'll tell you because amongst us girls, with your exception, we're all friends, I became 50 years old, so I'm an old lady now. So I've been thinking about, my career and how the market has changed, which is partly why I'm going to talk to you about transformation. And seeing how things like ecosystems that I was familiar with, and that I'm sure some of you are familiar with, are changing as we serve large and small businesses. So I will talk to you more, I'm talking about B2B, but there will be more of a small business flavor, if that's okay. There's a mix. And I don't know if you please ask questions on the way. Always welcome. Yeah. But I wanted, this is one of the topics that you chose, and so I'd be very interested also to see what feedback you've got, what you've been looking at in terms of new competitors, and see if you see the same organisations that I do. Because what I wanted to talk to you about today is about, yes, how enterprises, large and small, are changing, using digital, and who they're trusting to help them with that transformation. And I think there are new types of competitors. It all comes from a different perspective now. Now, should I make it on a big screen? Can I make, or is this size?
You know what? It's gone.
It's gone.
This one should be on your computer.
It should be. Yeah, you're right. We flip it around. Maybe we should do. Let me try that. Oh yes. Let's try that again. Extend. Should we just do duplicate?
Yes.
Oh, that's better, okay. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about new competitors, and we'll call them competitors from the perspective of if you're a traditional service provider like, like a telco, which is, much of the market we're serving. I'm just going to switch this off. I'd hate it to ruin while I'm speaking to you guys. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, though most of you do, so I'm Camille Mendler, and I run our small business practice at Ovum. I'm fortunate enough to work with a number of clients, including yourselves, around the world. And this reflects trends that are global, but also specific to Malaysia, in my view. And let's see if we come across some of the same companies. So what I'm going to go through is just some of the background, just a short background, because I think we're all experts in this market in terms of B2B transformation, but just level setting in terms of some of the trends, in terms of changes, why the competitive landscape is changing, the types of ecosystems that are changing, and see if you look at the ecosystems in the same way. And then I want to just go through a few examples of these new types of competitors. Some of them are brand new types of organizations that are selling B2B services, and others are existing companies that you may be familiar with that are changing what they do fundamentally. I don't think I've got a slide for every single example, but I've just pulled out a few because I know it's towards the end of the day, and let's have more of a chat than a lecture about this. So we know, all of us know, that there is so much competition now for the budget, which is a digital transformation budget. And what's interesting about the digital transformation budget, it's not just what we traditionally thought was an ICT budget, because as business process, we look at technology and business processes, expenditure that was once maybe in people might be going into technology instead. So there's a change in terms of the expenditure. And it's disrupting the technology landscape and also bringing in new companies. So new competitors are exploiting the fact that they have a relationship with businesses in other parts of what businesses do. It might be in financial services, it might be in supplying other types of goods, maybe paper, maybe products, but they're trying to get a piece of the action which might be technology budget. And so that the boundaries of what I call the technology budget are really changing as you look at different activities and look at examples. Can be digitized, and if they're digitized, then there are different types of service providers that could do that. And so my belief is if you're going to be successful as a supplier to businesses, you have to adapt not only to a new competitive landscape, but understand that your competitors might have a relationship with someone quite different within an enterprise than the traditional IT buyer as well. And that relates also to a discussion about who are the buyer personas within companies. And with these surveys that we've done, and by the way, just want to let you know, we've done 2 surveys in Malaysia recently. So one was a general ICT enterprise insights survey, which is general trends, what are people going to do in cloud, outsourcing, application services. We did that a few months ago. And we also did an IoT survey here in Malaysia of really larger enterprises. So be aware you have access to these surveys. If you have any questions, you want to get some of that data, let us know. And the third thing I want you to know is that I am planning, with Hui Xian's assistance, who is our senior analyst based here in Malaysia, we're planning a survey of small businesses here in Malaysia, but that will be in Q1. So I would really value your input in terms of what questions would be valuable to you, in terms of what small businesses in Malaysia want. Just by the by, just be aware of that. That's coming down, we're in the early stages of that. But here we're going to talk about some of the existing research that we've done. And from that existing research, we know that there is a massive transformation going underway that will happen over the next 2 years. In many industry sectors here in Malaysia and actually across Southeast Asia, we know that a large percentage of enterprises have already started digitizing their business processes using cloud. And in the next 2 years, there'll be another further 40-odd% of companies that are going to be relying on, let's say, cloud services for communications, for storage, etc. And so the next 2 years, I think, will be really decisive in terms of winners and losers in the supplier landscape. Okay. So, just to make the point that those that have control over technologies are not just in IT. This is from our ICT Enterprise Insights Survey. This is mid-sized organizations. And what we're trying to pull out here is what other departments within enterprises have control over IT budget. And so what you can see in manufacturing, number 1, other than IT, is operations. In retail, sales and distribution is very important, as is marketing. Sometimes those are merged. And you'll see a different picture in different industries. And so those organizations have different buyers with power. And I wouldn't use that term shadow IT. We use that term quite a lot, or have done over the past few years, saying, oh, well, these people are not legitimately investing in technology. But here, many of these stakeholders have a legitimate access to IT budget or technology budget. So I wouldn't call it shadow IT. Their expenditure is very visible and legitimate and should be addressed, even if they come from a non-IT department. And so if you've historically, let's say you're a systems integrator and you've only dealt with an IT manager, well, you're missing out on other places to sell your services. You need to be a bit more sophisticated. Anyway. Yes, let me go now.
It's surprising to see the Malaysia services, they're not spending on R&D.
Well, they are spending on R&D. So this is only saying, let's say, out of all of the different departments that have access to IT budget, technology budget in, let's say, manufacturing or financial services, these others have more power than R&D. That doesn't mean that R&D doesn't spend, but it's not as high, interestingly. But it's a point, actually. You think R&D would be maybe a bit high. Well, manufacturing is relatively high. Interestingly, professional services is quite high, but there aren't that many R&D players. Media advertising, there is some there. But yeah, no, that's a point. That's how the survey came out, so that's what I can say. Operations and sales is...
Or is it because they're looking at wait and see, for financial services will be a spread?
I'm not sure, but you've asked a good question. I think I should look into that. But, it still illustrates the point that it's fragmented. The ownership of technology budget is actually fragmented across different industries. That's the main point, but I'll look into that.
It could be the return on investment for the particular verticals. For manufacturing, maybe they save lots on the processes and stuff like that.
It could be. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a different story in each one of those verticals. Let me see if I can get some more narrative on that. But in any case, just keep in mind it's fragmented. And because it's fragmented, the reasons why, and this, by the way, this is mid-sized or mid to large organizations, the reasons why people invest in technology this is 100 to 1,000 employees. This just happens to be. This is what I pulled out. This is the best sample. But when you're looking at smaller businesses, there's a similar pattern. But also, I just wanted to pull this out, that the reasons that people invest in technology around their business, right? And the business reasons are, interestingly, not, particularly if you're looking at smaller companies, they're not just about saving money. And this is an aggregate view. This is across a number of countries in Asia, but actually the same pattern was seen in all of the other countries we looked at, that in many industries, nearly every single industry, this was more important. Finding, being more effective in marketing to customers and finding customers was more important than the issue of cutting costs or managing costs. These two are the strongest, but this is by far more interesting and more relevant in a number of verticals, which I think is positive in a way.
Does managing churn come under the responsibility?
Well, hiring and keeping staff?
No, keeping customers.
Marketing and finding new customers is not the same as necessarily churn management.
So where would that come?
Well, it wasn't on. There was a list, and that wasn't one of the issues. But they were allowed to write in, and that didn't come up. So it's not about losing customers. It's more about selling more effectively and finding new ones, selling more to the ones they've got already, and finding new ones. So I guess churn didn't come up as big as an issue, but it's an issue, but it's not as high as these ones.
But maybe because it's SME rather than the telcos, which is the...
Oh yeah, that's true. Now these are, to be clear, I haven't broken this out by vertical, but this includes manufacturing, retail, professional services. But the pattern was fairly similar by industry, which I thought was interesting. So, they need... So it's an outward face. What I'm saying is many of these small businesses are looking outward. Their challenges are about outward issues, not inward issues. And going digital and appealing to customers more effectively in a digital manner is not easy. And if you remember some of the work we had done in the past, in fact, almost half, and in a few countries, more than half of small businesses said that they really didn't feel they had the skills to go digital, and they were losing. Their business was actually, their lack of skills had harmed their business. And that's something we'll probe again and see if that's changed, since this was done like a year and a bit ago.
And the reason for the third one, is it keeping up with the Joneses, or is it?
No, it's actually keeping up. Sometimes it's related to compliance, but it's also about competing more effectively by using technology. If you ask some of these companies afterwards, if you go there into more detail. So it's not really keeping up at all. It's, I think, competitive differentiation through using technology.
But would the new generations of employees coming out with the youngsters, would that be easier for this company to keep up with the new technology?
Well, we actually, I don't think I've got it in this deck, but I actually did look at age. I looked at age, and there were some interesting things with with our respondents, because we did this globally, and I looked in terms of different job titles, different age, gender, and things like that. So In fact, the younger people responded that they found that their employer also felt that they were struggling with technology. Their employer was not using technology effectively, even if they were using the technology. That's something that came up. And also, the other big trend was by age was they would buy from different channels. So the younger the buyer, the more likely they were going to buy online. No surprises there. But the older the company, or the older the buyer, like if they're 50 odd or something ancient like that, then they're more likely to want to speak to a human being to buy. Yeah?
Okay, one more question.
Personal touch. Personal touch, yeah, exactly.
Did they define what they meant by digital skills?
Well, it's a range of different things. It could be marketing, it could be some compliance and security. And when we've done some follow-up interviews, just understanding the terminology of digital as well. It's a range of different things. Just basic navigation of the digital environment. So that's, a very negative finding, but it also has an impact on the types of companies that they will trust. And so I think that's really important. So if number one on their list is trying to find new customers, are they going to go to a telco for advice on finding new customers? Is that likely? Well,
can I ask you one more question?
Yes, of course. I want questions.
Did any of the SMEs have a digital skills dictionary, for example?
I never asked him. We didn't ask him that. But you know what? It's a question we could ask on the survey in Q1.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm serious. If you have questions that you would like us to ask, we'll put them on the list.
I come from the research side, and one of the things that we're doing is actually trying to define what is digital and media literacy, and coming up with an index and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I would love to talk to you about this. And also, there are some of my clients have actually got online questionnaires about digital skills and scoring. So you can so an example is like Deutsche Telekom. You can go online and say, they'll ask you all these questions. Do you know how to do this online? Do you know how to do that? Do you know to yes, no, whatever? Have you heard of this? And it scores you. Also, there was a really, really interesting piece of research done by the OECD. Have you seen this? This came out in July, and I've got a copy of the report somewhere, and it looks at benchmarks for a range of different countries, different age groups, whether they can do certain things online or in a non-digital manner. So you might want to look at that as well. And I think there's some relationships. So it scores skills as well. So I think that'd be a good piece of empirical data you could compare against as well. I think that Malaysia was on there because it wasn't just it was a range of countries around the world. Let me dig that out, and then you can check out some of that skills piece. If you're going to do some sort of calculation, would you do it on a piece of paper or would you use Excel? Type of thing,
Yeah, we can share it with our research.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so what else do I want to say? Oh yeah, so trust. So if the number one concern for some of these companies is like marketing, then maybe it shouldn't surprise us that telcos are not number one on the list. And you ask the question, who do you trust for business and technology advice? Now, of course, this was a predefined list, okay? So, we put the list together and then they've scored who did they trust, and this is shown by company size, okay? If I did it by vertical, it wouldn't be too much different except that transportation companies like telcos slightly more. That was the only trend that I noticed. But telcos are never number one on the list, and consultants are always number one. In some countries, telcos are down here. Indonesia is a good example. Telcos are back here. Brazil, telcos are back here. But you'll see other types of companies, just to check. So trade associations, not very high overall. In Germany, quite high. They have a culture of apprenticeship and trade associations, so it's a different thing. But considering this is an aggregate view of Asian countries, it's interesting that accountant comes up relatively high. And I'll come back to that because that's an example of a non-traditional competitor, shall we say, providing services potentially to businesses. I'll come back to that in a minute. And of course, new competitors could be viewed in web search, and web search, Google or Alibaba, etc. You could drop that in there as well. Anyway, what is very clear with so many businesses that are not comfortable with their digital skills, they need help, right? So they want guided support for business, for their transformation. And so that's what's triggering change.
Did anyone
in Trusted
say,
Advisor.
Did anyone say government?
I have to say that I did not put government on the list. So maybe that's something I could correct for next year's survey, okay? I put banks, so there are also, we'd put in other and things like that, but I didn't put government. Banks came down fairly low in most, but yeah, I could put that in.
For example, after...
I know, oh no, it's not true. We had chambers of commerce, which implies government. Yeah.
Quasi.
Yes, quasi-government. So from that perspective, and again, they didn't come up too high.
Yeah, because that's what the government is trying to do, is to drive the digital economy.
Right, so interestingly, my colleague, Hussein, is considering comparing governmental programs, SME programs, startup support programs. So you might find that intriguing. Benchmarking yourselves against, I don't know, Canada or Vietnam or whoever, Anyway, so, alright, so this is too busy, but I will just go through it. So, as I said, there are different people who've got control over the technology budget in different companies. And some of the work that we did was looking at what we call buyer personas. So there's a view of what type of person is going to buy, is important to try to target. And so we came across 4 different personas, and they're associated with different types of jobs. So there's like a visionary type, and he's going to be, it's usually a he, not always, but is going to be typically someone who runs the business, who's the business owner, versus someone who's an expert buyer, who's more likely to be an IT person. Now, in smaller organizations, there is no official IT person, so that person doesn't exist in many smaller businesses. And then there are other roles, like an administrator role. And there might be an office manager. Many organizations, small organizations, got an office manager, often female, and they are a pragmatic buyer. They're different buyer types. So an administrator is a pragmatic buyer. They want to get the job done. They want to keep the business running smoothly, right? And so their concerns are, sure, managing costs, particularly administrative burden, that type of thing, compared to a visionary who might say to repeat that number one issue, which is I want to find new customers. I'm really concerned. Yes, I'm concerned about my costs, but my number one concern is, finding new customers and competing more effectively. And compliance comes up again and again. So these are the different types of buyer personas, and then there's a maverick who is interesting in a self-employed environment. They're a freelancer, or they might be a line of business executive. So someone working in, a marketing department or some operational department, and they're a tactical buyer. They want to solve their particular problem for their department, not for the whole world. They've got a view that's quite internal, right? So these are different types of people who have control over technology budget, and it's important to think about them, and they have different preferences in terms of who they will buy from. Okay, so you can imagine that an IT buyer is more like an expert buyer is more likely to buy from a traditional IT organisation, but a maverick might buy from somebody else, and I'll just tease out who some of those companies are. Okay, so. That was just a brief setup of how some of the priorities are changing amongst B2B providers. But let's talk about different ecosystems. Now, I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but if we think about the function of the B2B ecosystem, different things that are done to different functions in terms of creating a product, distributing a product, making sure that product suits a particular business, configuring a product, making it secure, allowing consumption of that product, and then improving the process. There are different types of organizations involved. This is a functional view of the B2B ecosystem. And if we put in names of organizations, you might have an equipment vendor or a software vendor or a device vendor that identifies the market need. And there are new players out there as well, sort of different colors. There are distributors, right? They distribute the equipment or just help distribute the services, and there are resellers out there. There are consultants. There are value-added resellers who specialize in a particular solution. Then there are telcos. Telcos don't create, but they support the consumption of a digital service, okay? And let's say a business consultant might be improving consumption. Now, just to be clear, some organizations work in different areas and are moving into different areas. All I'm trying to show here is what the starting point is. So an integrator, for instance, can assess the need of a business for a particular digital service and help configure and help them consume a digital service. But there are lots of new types of players emerging, as well as these types of organizations changing. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I have just a couple of examples I thought were interesting that I'll go through later on. So that's part of the traditional landscape, but there is another landscape as well of non-technology companies moving into the ICT ecosystem. And so assuming this, here I'm focusing on small business, but actually these organizations are relevant for larger business too. They might be marketing agencies, they might be human resources outsourcing companies, financial companies, co-working providers, office equipment retailers. I'll give you examples of all of these, who now sell not just equipment, but services that are digital services. And they're non-traditional, they didn't come from a technology background, but increasingly are providing technology services, either because they have to continue to survive in their business, or because the business processes have evolved. So sometimes it's by accident, and sometimes it's by design that they're starting to sell technology services. Okay? Am I making sense? Yes.
Well, in that sense, does mean IT specialists would be quite high in demand, because like I say, all these non-technology companies.
Well, the thing is, as you'll see, some of these guys are becoming specialists in their own way. So there's a role for many different players in the ICT market. But let me just give you a couple of examples, which hopefully make sense. Here are two examples. I think probably the most relevant one. This is just to illustrate how people are changing their business model. Okay, in a number of different ways. So the two examples, IKEA is here in Malaysia. I know they're around the world. They bought a company called TaskRabbit. TaskRabbit doesn't employ. It is a platform where freelancers advertise their services, and the services might be, I will assemble this horrible IKEA wardrobe for you, or I will clean your house, it costs X per hour, or it might be, I'll help you, I don't know, do security sweep on your laptop. It's a range of different things, all sorts of different, this freelance marketplace called TaskRabbit. So IKEA's done it for a good reason for them, is because people don't like assembling furniture from IKEA, so this makes sure that they secure the consumption of their core product, but also diversifies their revenues. Here is another one. Office Depot sells printers and paper and toners and laptops, and it used to sell, software and retail. It is just hired, they're in the US, they're not really international, but they've just hired the person who ran the SME channels from Verizon, and they're launching a range of services that they're now going to sell through their own reseller channel. And they're going to be selling digital marketing services, connectivity, applications, payroll services, basic applications that all businesses need, and they're targeting companies with fewer than 50 employees. So they become a new competitor, I think you'd agree, in the market, competing against traditional IT resellers, traditional, say, telcos that might be trying to sell more than broadband. So that's an example of, you know, diversifying traditional revenues moving into services. And that's a driver for many businesses. But there are others that I want to talk about, but those are two ones that have just come up only in the past few months. It's funny because I was doing some work with them. Actually, it was a woman who was in charge of here at Verizon, and now she's moved into Office Depot. So because Verizon was doing a lot with SME, so I'm sure they weren't very happy. I know they weren't when she left. But anyway, I digress. So let me talk about a few new players out there, and I've tried to pull out examples that are from Malaysia. Okay. So the first one I wanted to talk about is the accountant. We talked about the accountant. There are two, well, there's more than two of them. There are quite a few of them in Malaysia. Many of them call themselves cloud accountants. Here's one called Synergia Solution. I think they're in Petaling Jaya. The other one is Extra CC. I think, I forget where they are exactly. But what they do is much more than traditional accounting. So yes, they will do your bookkeeping. They will make sure you're reporting taxes. They'll also do payroll for you, so you can pay your employees. But they'll also do things like check whether you're compliant when you do new things, like do you need to pay tax if you advertise on Facebook? Now, that's a type of problem that a traditional accountant would never know about, right? But these companies are doing that. They're also digitizing classic business processes. Have any of you run a small business? See, I was self-employed some years ago, and this is what I remember doing for my accountants, giving them piles of paper so they could check, you know, check, that I was reporting it accurately and that they could deduct certain things. But now it's entirely digitized. You send them this stuff, they scan it all in, or you scan it yourself, and you know, it's all, the paper all disappears. But the other thing is that they'll also provide office automation solutions, some of these guys. So Synergia, which is, I don't know if have you come across this company before, Synergia? You haven't, okay. So they'll do a bunch of things. They'll do web hosting, because of course you've got all of this data that's been scanned, and it's your data after all. Scan it and store it. They will help you with that. They'll help you with e-commerce as well. They'll help you do web development. And they're often, so you can see they're doing much more than what an accountant would traditionally do. And they're often aligned to what I call beneficial ecosystems. So if you ever go to the website of some of the cloud accounting firms, like Xero of New Zealand, or QuickBooks or Sage of the UK, you'll see that they will list partners that have got applications that are similar, that can integrate with the accounting solution, but also they'll recommend accountants. So these are the beneficial ecosystems. So let's assume that I've already started using Xero. I want to open up a subsidiary in Malaysia. I want to find a Malaysian accountant. I go to the Xero website. It'll say, here are some people in Malaysia who can provide services. So this is a new type of player, and there are a few of them out there. And so they either provide additional digital services or they recommend them. Okay? Yeah.
Did either of these companies describe their client base?
Yes. So it's a range. I chose these two because they explicitly go for small business, but they actually go to medium-sized businesses as well. So it's not just for SMEs, but I'm just because I focus on SMEs now, I made sure that they do, these ones did too, but they will go for mid-sized companies. They'll list some of the companies that they do business with, and by all means look at their websites. So they're really quite sophisticated, but this one here, you'll see, this is Extra CC, Malaysia's leading cloud accounting service for retailers, franchises, and startups. Okay? Very friendly, will show you how to set up a business. So perhaps, as you're trying to promote digital services, training, you should be talking to these guys as well. because they have an important role, particularly with small business. Because it's all about cash flow. If you've got cash flow, you're alive. No cash flow, you're dead as an organizer, as a business, right? Okay. So that's, to me, an important example of a different type of competitor.
How large are the companies?
Oh, it varies. There might be 20 people, 5 people.
No, I meant these two companies. What is their client base?
How many clients they've got? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. It's not a secret, but I think, these are, I think Synergia is about 30 people themselves. They've probably got hundreds of clients. But they could scale because of everything's digitized.
That's a good
yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
In terms of how fast are they growing, how big is that market?
I mean, my own personal accountant, I have never physically met him, ever. And everything I do with him is digital. I submit everything digitally to him. And he actually lives 5,000 kilometers away from where I live. So this is, it's convenient. You can do it anyway. In fact, some of these companies will advertise, we can do Malaysia and we'll do UK taxes as well. So they're mini multinationals as well. Consider that. So I think this is a very positive thing. Anyway, so that's one of the new types of competitors. And keep me honest on time as well. I don't want to overrun on you. This is out of left field slightly, but this is an example of a different type of competitor, and that's a franchise company. So Domino's Pizza, which again is here in Malaysia. I hate Domino's. Have you ever eaten it? It's disgusting.
I love it.
You don't, do you? Oh dear, terrible. But it's a franchise. And so, if you ever want to be a small business and want to, well, not guarantee that you're not going to go out of business, but increase your potential not to fail, then you buy a franchise because it's an it's a trusted business model, proven business model. So there are lots of franchises. McDonald's, franchise. Lots of fast food is franchise. But anyway, Domino's, the reason I mention them as an important competitor is because they can specify technology for their franchises. And in fact, what's happened is a group of franchises, Domino's franchises in the US, are now using the same unified communications platform, which includes a module with IoT, because unified communications is not just about the people, it's about the things as well, and the people and the things talking to each other. And so they're not just doing in-store communications and taking calls and bookings and things like that, they're also doing things like monitoring refrigeration, the temperature of the prep table, so things, so sanitation is very good, fan exhaust emissions to manage their power costs. So there are, regulatory reasons why they're using the Internet of Things with this unified communications environment. For hundreds and hundreds of franchises in the US are doing this, and it's perfectly likely that they'll replicate that elsewhere. And just a separate example of Internet of Things, in the UK, it's not in the US yet, they have a sensor that you at home, if you could have this, you press a button, it'll automatically order you a pizza. Like that. You don't have to call anyone. It's Bluetooth connected to your mobile phone, knows what you want, it's already programmed in. I always like, extra whatever peppers on my pizza, and it'll order it. Right? So, franchises can have enormous power, considering how many there are. And just to give you an example, in Malaysia, a different type of approach, but 7-Eleven, there are more than 2,000 7-Eleven franchises here in Malaysia alone. Now, that's arguably too much competition. However, they do more than sell, Coca-Cola at 11 o'clock at night. They're doing various things. They're facilitating e-commerce. They've got a deal with Lazada to help. So if you can't buy yourself, you don't have a credit card or something like that, you can click option is to pay at 7-Eleven. But they'll do things that are more digital themselves. They'll do managed print, some of them, some, not all, will do managed print services, photocopying. Many of them have got in-store Wi-Fi. You want to send an email at 3 o'clock in the morning? Go to the 7-Eleven. So again, broadband connected, selling digital services. So they have influence. they can recommend and market services. So would you agree that they're also a new type of competitor in the market? Because they have influence and they have access to their own networks of buyers. That's why I mentioned them as new types of competitors. Okay? So, again, moving into adjacencies. All right, this is an affinity group. I was just in Australia last week, and I was talking to Telstra about this. Master Builders is a trade association or an affinity group. They all have the same affinity of selling services in construction, and includes people in building and construction trades, electricity, plumbers, masons, roofers, that type of thing. And they have over 30,000 members. And for some time, Master Builders, this trade association, had noticed inefficiency in how people manage bids, schedule jobs and things like that. So they actually tried to develop their own software platform for their members. And it didn't go very well. So they started doing that, and then they started talking to Telstra, and Telstra said, we'll help you develop such a thing. So together they've developed a platform that does things like scheduling, calendar, compliance, safety checks for work. Has the electricity been done properly? Take a photo, see if it's certified, that type of thing. There's some sales and marketing, I've got a lead from the website, that type of thing. And it's targeted not at sophisticated people who've got university degrees, who know about digital necessarily. It's targeted at electricians, it's targeted at plumbers, and it's targeted to those using a mobile phone, and it's digitizing all their business processes. To me, that is the type of digital transformation we must not forget to achieve, and that is a new type of player in the market. It just so happens that they're working with a telco to achieve this, but to me, these are the forgotten parts of the workforce. And the fact that this trade association has initiated the thing, this is very profound. And actually, Telstra is thinking about replicating this potentially in Indonesia, but that's another story. They've not actually gone officially to market on this, so you're hearing about this a bit early. There's not been much press on this, but you can imagine how much more efficient someone is using this platform. They'd be more competitive. So that is a new type of competitor, and like I said, they've decided to do it themselves. Not to do it themselves, to partner with a service provider. Yes?
Do you know what are the charges like?
Excuse me?
Charges. Do you know what
They haven't done any of the pricing yet. They're testing it right now. But you should think about it. There's going to be a scale depending on how many services are taken. But it could be, like $2 for the appointment management and sales and marketing. They know their customers or their members really well. They know they can't charge an extra $50 a month to a plumber, right? They've got to do something that's going to have an immediate return. So, I will, paying more like 15 to 20 for all of these things, or breaking it down so you can take a couple of these services is going to be more attractive to a small business. And some of it's going to be done for free. Oh, and you reminded me, they are also going to do dedicated onboarding, because that's one of the things. To get small businesses to start using digital services, you can offer those services for free, but that's no guarantee or an incentive for them to use it. Why? Because they don't necessarily feel comfortable to use it. So they will have a call center and live web chat as well to help these plumbers and electricians use these services. So they feel comfortable and they feel it's a legitimate thing to do, sort of front load that. And in fact, Telstra has made an investment in a company that does remote technical assistance for small businesses, a company called Boomtown. So they will be helping to encourage, to nurture these builders, electricians, etc., to start using these tools. And that's the critical thing. That's another really smart thing that they've done. So that's why I'm saying that's another type of organisation. that's worth considering. And in fact, I've seen other relationships with affinity groups. Singtel had a deal with the Singapore Logistics Association that was trying to, again, try to sell certain services into the logistics industry, which is very important in, obviously lots of it's maritime in Singapore. But what they didn't have is they didn't have the onboarding support. And that's why it wasn't necessarily that successful. But with this, you can encourage, and once the word goes out, more and more people try it. So I think that's the secret sauce. We will see, like I said, this is soft launch so far, but I think that's one really to watch for that part of the workforce that's so traditionally ignored for digital services. Okay, right. This is another example of someone who's come out, organisations that have come out from another neck of the woods, like accountants. Digital marketing agencies, digital agencies. They might have been advertising agencies or PR agencies, or they might be something brand new, or they might have come out of web hosting. But digital agencies, they provide a range of digital marketing services to businesses large and small, and associated technology services. And I've come across these across the world, and as I say, they exist here in Malaysia as well. Here are two of them. There's Zimnet, and there's Fuse. Fuse is actually a global agency. Zimnet is a small agency here in Malaysia. They're both in Malaysia. So they'll do things like make sure that you rank high on Google, search engine optimization. They'll do social media presence. Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Do you have a website? They'll help with your branding. They'll do social content creation, like build pages for your website. But relatedly, they'll provide a range of digital services that relate, that would normally be sold by other types of companies. So they will do website design, they'll do user interface design, mobile application development. You want to sell your products, or many people just want to buy a product through their mobile phones, so they'll design an application for that. They'll again do cloud hosting. We'll design the website, we'll brand the website, we'll populate the website, we'll host it for you, or we'll tell you who to host it with. Yeah? And how can you divorce the digital marketing from the customer relationship management tool, or the Salesforce tool, or perhaps the e-commerce? All of this is related from someone who you just used to do advertising and a bit of marketing, right? So you can see how they have now access to other parts of technology budget that normally you wouldn't, originally a few years ago, you wouldn't have seen them get involved in. So again, this company advertises it. We do mobile apps. We'll create mobile apps, right? So they're, what would you call them? They're a software developer and they're a marketing expert. Oh, and they know about hosting. Oh, they know about content. There are new types of competitors out there in the ecosystem, suppliers in the ecosystem. So I think they compete against many traditional players, and they're increasingly important. Again, you're trying to support startups or help existing established companies transform. Talk to these guys as well. Because they're solving, what was the number one problem for those small businesses? Reach customers, market more effectively. So, very important. Am I making sense? So, it's just thinking just slightly laterally about who's got power in the ecosystem these days. Right.
Solutions providers.
Yeah, well, these are solution providers, specialists in certain areas. They're important not to an IT department, but to the CEO, to the chief marketing officer, to the sales chief in a particular organization. Different buyer persona. Okay. I'm sure you already know about some of these co-working providers. Since many of us, well, you're working in a traditional office. Many of us don't. We either work from home, or sometimes we want to rent a desk. I know that if I go into my office, I have to book a desk, because if we all came into our office, we'd be sitting on the floor. There's not enough space. Very nice offices. Come visit us one day. Central offices in London, right by St. Paul's, gorgeous. But not enough desks. It's too expensive for all of us, right? So anyway, we book the time. So there are lots of co-working providers who tap into this, right? Not just for large companies, but actually for lots of startups. So that they're not just provided as temporary offices, but fixed and hot desks rented by the hour. I'm sure you've dealt with some of these yourselves. They're good for supporting startups, but they're doing quite a lot of other things. They're helping with marketing and promotion. They usually have links to incubators. They have digital hub status, as I'm sure you know. Alibaba is working with some of these co-working providers. I'm mentioning two here, Works and Common Ground. Common Ground, which by the way has got plans to expand all over Asia. I think they've got 2 or 3 sites in Malaysia at the moment, but they also either provide these digital services themselves or provide referral to their partners. So again, hosting, cloud computing, applications, managed print services. I want to do some old-fashioned marketing physically. Again, e-commerce, digital marketing. They either do it themselves or they will refer the business to someone that is part of their trusted ecosystem, right? And then they'll do other things. I think I had some examples either in Malaysia or in Indonesia where some of them were focusing on women, some specialise for women, and they'll provide creches. So you may not have childcare, but you can do your work, rent a desk, drop your child in the creche. Anyway, so these are more like social clubs, right? They're like a nice club than an office, right? Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds great to me. So, great centres for startups, big firms, and again, power over technology budget, and focused on very technology-focused companies. Making sense? Have you ever been to any of these co-working places? They're quite fun. It's like going to like a Starbucks. There's always a coffee bar, and it's usually free. And then there's like coffee, nice places to sit down, sofas. There's probably bean bags to sit on, that kind of thing. And then there's desks and whatever. And like I said, they do a lot of social activities. So it's like belonging to a really nice club. So that's a new type of player in the market. So who would I rather go to a co-working provider for advice on my e-commerce strategy, or would I rather go to an IT reseller? And would I really go to a telco? I don't think so. So, power is shifting. And there are a couple of others out there that are worth looking at. Interestingly, in a market where more and more people are becoming freelancers, companies relying more on freelancers, there are more companies that are special agencies that specialize in outsourcing human resources activities, from payroll, which is more accountancy, to vetting candidates or managing contracts, and there are a few of them, and some of them are startups or companies established in Malaysia. Payroll Panda, which you must have come across before, is a Malaysian company, and Payday, HR in a Box, also Malaysian company. So they will do things like enterprise resource planning, they'll do tracking of employees, their time and location, so IoT again, they're using IoT services, they'll do vetting of applications. So those organisations also got an expanded role, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the accounting and this HR function merging. There's some indications of that already in some companies. So again, a new type of competitor in the IT ecosystem. Okay. So those are the fun, sexy ones, so to speak. And I think they're really interesting. Small businesses trust their accountants. Those are classic business advisors. So if they're recommending technology services that they themselves use, they're important. They're important. But that's not all. If we think, I'm not going to go through all of the reinvented players, but I'm just going to pull out a couple of them. But here's one. Okay, so this is a relatively new company anyway, but I think they're reinventing themselves. So they're an OTT messaging company. We all know WhatsApp. How many of you are using WhatsApp? Admit it, you are all using WhatsApp, aren't you? He and I, Hussein and I, when we communicate, when we catch up, or is it Monday mornings, do we try Skype for Business? Yes, and it never works, right? So we default to WhatsApp, because it works, right? Excuse me? We don't use the fixed line. Sometimes, you're right, we should maybe do that. Maybe we should try the old fixed line. You know why I don't do that? Because my only fixed line phone is in my hallway.
She was referring to a WhatsApp competitor.
Telegram.
Oh, sorry, what did you say? Which one?
Telegram.
Oh, well, yeah, but there are several. You're right, there are others out there as well. But I was just thinking about them just because they had recently announced what people had expected for some time, which is that they would have a proposition for businesses. And the really interesting thing to me about WhatsApp Business, it will be licensed to large enterprises. For small enterprises, they're talking about it being free.
With the recent news with America taking back net neutrality, what are the implications for this sort of B2B?
Well, those implications would be US implications, not WhatsApp implications, because WhatsApp can set itself up, and has done, in sites outside of the US. And then consider how many people, I think, is it their the biggest market is Indonesia anyway, I think second or third. So I'm not sure it'll have any impact on them, and certainly not here, right? And
would that be a sort of global trend?
What, this WhatsApp?
People following what the FCC did?
Look, people do follow what's happening in the US market because everyone hates Trump so much. Probably they want another reason to be cross at something else stupid that he's done. Am I being political? Possibly, but well, but he's had his own opinion about that, the president. Yes. Yes, I think that's probably about right. That's probably about right. But, people are interested in the US market. It's such a large market, and of course many startups come out of the US, so, but I wouldn't necessarily say that everyone's replicating what happens in the US market. And it's a fair point about net neutrality, but I don't think it will have an impact on WhatsApp. I think the core point here is this is something that's come out of the consumer space that was viewed as disruptive anyway, has taken over globally, just like B2B, like BlackBerry Messenger did at one point. But in terms of doing something fundamental that's really important to small businesses, such as engaging with their customers, as long as you opt in, suddenly, at little or no cost, small businesses can now do promotion via WhatsApp. They can do interaction with them, they can sell, they can send documents, pictures, whatever. So that's very disruptive, I think, to many existing e-commerce, CRM, various other people. We don't understand the implications so as well. Obviously, the Facebook tie-up. So I think these, in fact, next week I have to, in fact, I had a debate with a client just last week on this. I have to debate this with a client, a telco next week, as what's the impact of this going to be.
Yeah, for them it's dark social.
It's not good.
You can't see into it.
No. But I think there are some weaknesses. If this is going to be a proper business service, then if it fails, you've got to have things like SMS fallback. You've got to have, it'd be good if you could offer some sort of payment. If there's a payment facility that's not in there yet, but how difficult will it be to add that on?
Yeah, China has it, in their sort of what? Exactly.
And the Chinese market on that point, I think, is really a leader, right? So they will. I think it's not unreasonable to expect that WhatsApp Business and similar services will replace customer service interaction and a bunch of other things. And I think today the focus has been on large business, but I think the impact will be much more profound in small business. And so this is money that someone's going to lose, I think. So that to me is someone who's transforming. Right? Anyone who's been in the market for more than 3 years is an established player. So I put them in there. So that's one example. Here's some, just two more examples, maybe less sexy, so to speak. But Equinix, been around for years as a data center company. So they're building data centers, they're buying data centers, and they're very good at that. And they've been really acquisitive, bought a lot of data centers around the world, just as people like the telcos step out of it, or there's consolidation in the market. But really, where they differentiate is on interconnect. Our digital economy depends on the interconnection of different public and private clouds, and mobile transactions and a bunch of other things. And Equinix, where they differentiate, is they are the meeting point, they're the interconnection point for the global digital economy. And that's how they've repositioned themselves. So sure, they make money out of co-location, but they make really the profit margin off the interconnect, right? And to me, that's a company that has pivoted. That has really pivoted. So, they've got, 150 data centers, they've got 170,000 or more cross-connects, and they claim they have, almost 7,000 businesses in their ecosystem. I'm sure that the number changes every week. You hear more people, and sort of connecting directly to Amazon Web Services. They'll connect through Equinix and have access to the entire world. So the power is shifting there as well. Okay, so I think they're worth looking at from having been a traditional data center provider.
Are they providing mostly to SMEs or?
No. They are actually serving large enterprises. They're not serving SMEs, not really at all. So they're dealing with the huge the web scale cloud providers, global cloud providers. They're dealing with large enterprise. They deal with government. They deal with telcos. They're really a major, profound player in the market that people don't. Not everyone, unless you're not an expert, but unless you're aware of the digital ecosystem, you probably wouldn't even have heard of them because they're like the plumbing, but they're very powerful plumbing.
Are there lots of competitors in this space, or is it just?
There are some regional players or people who do aspects of this, but they've been building up this story about this in being an interconnection platform for a number of years, and I think they're far away ahead of anyone else, in my humble opinion. So I think they're a very interesting company to check out, because they've taken that interconnect story in so many different ways, from physical cross-connects in their data centers, fiber cabling and things like that, to something that's much more powerful to interconnect all of the major clouds in the world. So, very interesting company.
Do they own any infrastructure of their own?
Yeah. Oh, they do. They do. That's it. They've been not only building their own data centers, they've been buying out other data center providers. So various brands have dropped out of the market because they've been bought by Equinix.
No, my question was more, are they going into the telco space?
No, because they view that they are a partner to telcos because they're the glue, between all of the different intermediaries in the digital ecosystem. And they're comfortable with that. They don't want to compete directly. Not at this point, anyway. But, telcos might say, well, we could provide the interconnect, but Equinix will say, well, we'll give you connections to 7,000 different people, and the telco can only do 20 or 30, depending on what your needs are. I mean, you have to pay a fee for that. But they're vastly ahead, depending on what you're looking for. Okay? And then, sorry, my last example, I said I wasn't going to go through every single one of them, but this is a company that I find very interesting, Ingram Micro, world's largest technology distributor. Have you come across them before? Yeah. Bought by this technology subsidiary of a major Chinese shipping group. The transaction was worth $6 billion. Now you can imagine that a technology distributor whose entire business for the past 15 plus years has been helping people to ship printers and printers and PCs, they have to change their business model in a world where we're virtualizing everything, right? And so they've started doing that. And they do it a number of different ways. One, they bought a cloud marketplace provider called Odin, originally Parallels. You may have come across them. And so they provide the underlying infrastructure for software as a service, transactions, and they have more than 10 million SME customers that they serve through their customer base. Many telcos use them. They claim 300 telco customers, but I think one of the most interesting things about Ingram Micro is they're not only enabling telcos to sell cloud services, they're turning the 200,000 plus traditional telecoms and IT resellers into digital service providers, into managed service providers. They're helping resellers transform their business model. So instead of being resellers of laptops, they become resellers of software as a service, of cloud, of security and other things. And they do various things. So they provide billing in their operational platform. They provide digital marketing services to some of their resellers in some countries. They provide financing, technical support, education, logistics. So their goal is to create the biggest cloud ecosystem in the entire world. And they help create new cloud service providers who might have originally been a reseller of laptops once.
How big do you reckon is the white label sort of market? Is it
The white label,
cloud store? I mean, is people rebranding theirs using these digital services, right?
well, the marketplace is licensed to telcos and other companies, so that they can rebrand it and just use it as a transactions platform to buy certain services, or rather lease certain services on a monthly basis. How big is that? It's not a huge money spinner. For them it's not bad because they get the license revenues, but for other telcos, let me give you the example of Telstra in Australia was using one of these cloud marketplace platforms. They've been doing it for, I think, 6 or 7 years, 6 years I think it is, and their revenues on that are only $70 million. It's a drop in the ocean.
Is there like a security concern? You know, like this is now China.
Well, on those marketplaces?
Yeah, I mean, do governments stay away from?
Why would there be a security concern necessarily?
I'm just asking.
No, I haven't come across that. They sell cloud-based security services on those marketplaces, but think of them as just an infrastructure. But that's another example of a company that's really moving into adjacencies. Anyway, so implications for B2B wallet share, just my final slide, just to make the point. So I said that the drive to go digital is disrupting a lot of ecosystems, traditional technology ecosystems. And what that actually means is what has already been a competitive market becomes even more fragmented. Example, Ingram Micro, 300,000 technology resellers that can become cloud service providers on a white label somebody else's infrastructure. So digital marketing agencies in their thousands selling cloud services or helping people do digital marketing or CRM. So extreme fragmentation of the ecosystem of digital services is what you should expect from what was hundreds to tens of thousands of companies. And so many of these new competitors are exploiting B2B mindshare established elsewhere. The accountants are exploiting the relationships that they don't have with an IT department at all. The digital marketing agencies, they've never dealt with an IT department. They may or may not have dealt with the business owner. So look at these organizations. They typically are working in what I call a beneficial ecosystem. There is someone who's recommending them to a business, or they are recommending others. So if you look at companies, the accountancy companies like the Xeros of the world, you'll see that they will recommend a bunch of other partners. And so the boundaries, as I say, of technology budget are really expanding. That Domino's Pizza example, they're using the Internet of Things to improve business processes. They are spending on, this IoT solution in an area they didn't spend on technology at all, but they're improving their business processes, their efficiency, all of those franchises, those Domino's Pizza franchises. And so that's a really good thing that the boundaries of the budget are expanding, but onboarding is really important. You need to help businesses, particularly small businesses, use these services. There needs to be some level of, is it mini consulting, but certainly some level of onboarding. Here are these features. These are the 3 critical features for you to use this cloud-based application properly. That's really important. And I think that is where a lot of success and failure will be. You can't just have a cloud marketplace without telling people how to use stuff, right? So, I think if you're going to be successful in this evolving ecosystem, you need to understand there are different types of buyers out there, different buyer personas, like the maverick, or not just the expert, the visionary in a business that you can appeal to. So you need to adapt to those different users, provide some level of onboarding, and I think it also makes very clear that we're not really, in this world of digital transformation, we're more and more abstracted from technology, because trust me, a Domino's pizza franchise wasn't sold an IoT solution. They were sold, you can get more pizzas out faster at less cost. That's what they were sold. IoT, never heard of that. The heck is that? Give me more pepperoni. Anyway, so this is just a view of how the market's changing. And it's changing here in Malaysia. With the examples I gave you, just to be quite clear, you will see more and more of these types of digital companies, disruptive or not. Incrementally, they're changing how people buy technology and use services digitally.
Onboarding is like consultation.
Say that again?
Onboarding?
Yes. So it means, what are the features to set up ERP, to set up my calendar on my mobile phone. How do I do that? Okay, so spend 10 minutes with someone on the phone who's going to explain to you how to do it, and suddenly you've been onboarded. Because actually, it doesn't even take that long necessarily to use some applications. But unless there's someone there to help you, to hold your hand, some people aren't just going to try. Particularly if they've been offered this for free. Oh, pay only $1 or nothing, you get this application for free. It's free? Well, I have no intent. I'm not sure I want to use it. I don't know how to use it. I'm not going to bother to use it. So, unless you have some level of customer engagement, it's not about giving stuff away for free, it's helping them to use it. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are my thoughts for this time round. And I'm so glad you asked me questions, which meant that you were listening.
One closing question.
Yeah, for sure. Go on.
What can governments do in terms of policy and regulation? How do we support?
Well, okay, so it may be that some of the, so number one, I think you have to focus on not just those that innovate with software as a service or cloud or mobile applications or whatever. Consider those that can provide the education, can provide those onboarding skills. They should have access to some of the support, the funding, as much as those that have got created, some new application. They are really critical to get the market going. That would be my number one piece of advice. Yeah. So, and everyone can be a teacher. You know that expression, train the trainer and things like that? Crowdsource training and stuff like that. I think if there's some way we could encourage more of that. And by the way, what I've noticed is that there are some companies willing to do that. It's interesting that Alibaba, when I look at the marketing of Alibaba, they're going for technology startups. But when I look at Google, well, that's my impression, the marketing. Would you agree with that? That they're more focused on technology companies, technology literate companies. But if I look at Google, interestingly, if I look at their marketing recently that I've seen, okay, in Europe, they are focusing on plumbers. I'm serious. They're focusing on plumbers, they're focusing on electricians, they're focusing on people who are maybe more than 50 years old and therefore, did not grow up digital.
Greenfield.
They're not just focusing on greenfield, they're focusing on typically less digitally literate professions.
Digital greenfield.
Well, you can call it, that's a positive way of looking at it. Or I would say those that have been digitally ignored in the past. So please don't be discriminatory in terms of class in the workforce. Everyone, and I hope that Master Builders example underscores that really important point.
Is the inclusion.
That's right, it's for everyone, yeah. So, any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you think the telcos would how would they react? I mean, would they like open a subsidiary company and to do this sort of things?
Yeah.
It's interesting you asked me that question. So when I go back to Europe, I'm going to see one of my clients who's on an acquisition drive to do exactly that. They are looking to buy lots of smaller companies that can do mini consulting to help onboard smaller business. And then I'm doing a workshop later that week to someone else who's seeing how they can do something similar through partners. So telcos are, some telcos, a few are understanding this need for onboarding and some mini consulting professional services to get people on board. So they're open to the idea. Yeah.
So potential research sort of focus could be onboarding on the digital economy.
That's right. That's right. So it's all positive. It's all good stuff, I think. Yeah, I'm done. But thank you very much once again for hosting me. It's always such a pleasure to come here. Thank you very much.